The Akashic Records are pretty much the field. I call it a field. It's not so much a book. If you think of everything you've ever thought, said, did across lifetimes, your current life, it's always getting uploaded to the field. If you think of the way the Microsoft Office suites work right now, it auto saves everything, right? So if you're typing something on your Word document, it auto saves it. That's exactly how the Akashic Records work too. It auto saves everything in real time to the field. So there's different records. There's different Akashic records. The Akash is it's a Sanskrit word, but it's everything. It's the ether. It's everything that's around us. Technically, we are just consciousness that's having an experience. And to get even more deep, what is God? What is source? We are just in the consciousness, the dream, if you will, of what source is. Source is a state of consciousness that wanted to experience more of itself.
Welcome to a Broaderlenspodcast.
The opinions expressed on Broaderlenspodcast are those of the guest speakers and do not necessarily reflect the views of the host or Broaderlenspodcast.
Welcome to Broaderlenspodcast. It's an honor and privilege to have you. Thank you for coming on.
Hey, thank you for having me.
Yeah, I look forward to learning from you. So I'm excited. Maybe I'll let you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do, because I tend to screw that up.
Okay, no problem. So my name is Shawlea, and I have a little side business. Sorry if that's my dog, if you can hear that in the background. I also known by Akasha Hawai'i. I actually prefer people to kind of refer to me by that and eliminate the personal name. All I do pretty much is I'm an intermediary of sorts. I just deliver messages from the records to the client themselves. And that's in a nutshell what I do. I do Akashic Records readings, and I also do energy healing, primarily Reiki. That's the style that I learned, but I don't just do Reiki. I'll put it that way.
Yeah, thank you. Maybe we'll get into your upbringing, share a little bit about your upbringing, your life, and how you grew up, if you don't mind.
Okay, yeah, great. So I was born and raised in Hawaii, on Oahu, and also on the Big Island, and pretty typical, I would say, upbringing here in Hawaii, like your average local person. Then I went to school in California for college, and thought I was going to stay there, to be honest, but I ended up coming back home because I'm really close to family. And my sister just had her first child when I was in college. So because I'm that close to family, I was like, I don't want my nephew to not know who Auntie is. So then I moved home, amongst many other reasons, and haven't pretty much left since. Went straight into my career, my corporate career. And that was my life for, I would say, all the way up until 2023. Just doing, got married, got divorced, had kids, the whole 9 yards. Up until 2023, that's when everything kind of changed. So as for most people, to be honest, I've found that collectively between, since the start of about 2019, a lot of things have changed for a lot of people. COVID being like kind of the jumping off point for a lot of us, but not the only reason. So I've found that with a lot of readings I've done with other people, which is really validating.
Yeah, thank you. You talked about 2020, and did you have like a COVID awakening?
Yeah. So COVID, I've come to learn was actually a blessing in disguise. It's like hindsight is 2020. COVID for a lot of us here in Hawaii, actually, Hawaii is very, I would say, slow to they follow the crowd, so to speak. So because we're so laid back, there's not really, it's kind of looked at weirdly if you air your dirty laundry or if you make waves, kind of a thing. So pretty much the entire state just went along with it. Oh, get the shot, listen to the fake rules that they were making up. I mean, some of the rules were so ridiculous. We're in Hawaii, so beaches are, this is our thing, right? You couldn't go to the beach. That was one thing that was absolutely ridiculous. You couldn't sit on the sand. You couldn't have large gatherings. I mean, the trade winds are also what a lot of people know of Hawaii for, is the beautiful trade winds that we have. So it's like, well, that's kind of weird that you can't have gatherings outside when we're not in a stagnant environment. So COVID was a big awakening for me too. I leaned more just because I thought it was so weird that they were pushing it here. That struck me as odd. I was never anti-vax prior to COVID. I went along with it like everybody else. I was like, all right, go get your shots, get this, get that, do it for my kids too. All right, get this, get that. But there was something weird and odd with COVID that I leaned more on the anti-vax crowd, even though I was never anti-vax. I just thought it was weird. So then I was pulled into, because of that, then I was pulled into like the conspiracy theorists, the everything that I wasn't really, to be honest. Like I said, I was never anti-vax, but it was so distinct, black or white. There was no in between. So then I pulled more on, I guess, the black side, which is, the anti-vax crowd, trying to tell. And this was a big part of the awakening too, was on social media, particularly Instagram, seeing other like-minded people, other spiritual pages. And that's what I started to look at. But I was always pretty spiritual growing up here in Hawaii. I mean, it's commonplace, you grow up with awake files, with ghosts, It's a very common thing here in Hawaii because we're such a mixed plate of cultures. So you have cultures from all over the world, including Polynesian and, Hawaiian, that automatically believe in the other side. So that was a given, but yeah, COVID was so interesting. So dealing with, the backlash of, hey, you're kind of looked at as lesser than in society for not getting the shot and everything, having to take the extra steps just to go to public places, being denied going to public places. I was like, I couldn't help but think about what people of color went through back when the U.S. was segregated. And that by no means was at all similar, it very slightly, but nowhere in the magnitude of what those people had to go through. My grandma is predominantly Hawaiian on my mom's side. So she was very brown, dark skinned. And she moved to New York with my grandpa, who is Italian. And I heard it from my mom that, she was considered Black in New York. So she had to do the whole, sitting on the other side of the bus thing, can't drink from the same water fountain. And here are her kids that are mixed. And so I thought about that. And she used to be called, like the N word and stuff like that. I was like, and it's funny because the juxtaposition of it is, oh, everybody loves Hawaii. They love Hawaiian culture. And here they are calling my grandma, who's, almost full Hawaiian, the N word and stuff. Like, you just kind of have to laugh about it now. Then, there's a time and a place to be angry about it, which every single person has the right to be angry about it, but not stay in that anger.
Yeah, thank you. I had a similar experience. I wasn't on social media, but that intuition, like something didn't feel right. Something was telling my higher self was telling me no, something's not right. And I don't judge people if they got it, but I kind of expected the same thing. Why make fun of me? I didn't really talk about it because I just was making a choice for me, and something didn't feel right. And a lot of the fear, you see all the separation and all kinds of stuff that they were putting out there in the media, and something just didn't feel right, and they didn't even have enough time to really see if the stuff worked. And you were pushing
Yeah.
this issue, offering free this, free that if you get it. It just didn't make sense. So
Yeah. It was as the Gen Z kids say these days, this is very sus.
yeah.
It was sus. But yeah, I was in the same boat, pretty much all of my friends and family group, including coworkers, all got it. Again, like you, I was like, there's no judgment call on my end. If anything, I'm getting the hot end of the stick here. But it was interesting. I was actually even kicked out of my office at one point. I went through the whole song and dance, getting the extra testing every single week, all the way to the point of a national, I think it was probably global too, that they wouldn't accept testing anymore. So if you didn't get the shot, you couldn't go into the office. And so I was very angry about that, because I was like, here I am following the rules, and then now I can't go into the office. So it was interesting, because during that time period, I had to be okay working from home. And at the time I had a toddler, so it was very difficult to work from home. I went to the office so that I could focus on my work. And when I was kicked out of the office and I was forced to learn to work from home, that's when I was like, all right, let me kind of eliminate distractions. Like here where I live, you might hear sirens, you hear my cat, you hear my dog, all those things you had to eliminate to focus on the task at hand. That I think probably the following year, they were asking everybody to go back to the office. And I was like, no, because now I'm, now I got it down. I'm okay working from home, so much so that the LED lights in the office bothered me, because I was used to working, with natural sunlight, things like that. It was just, an AC all day in the office. It's like, it's nice when it's hot, right? But then I also have AC at home. So things like that are kind of the challenges I know for a lot of people going back to the office after COVID. I think a lot of the younger generations are adaptable to, hey, if, I really admire the generation after me, which is the Gen Z kids, saying, I don't like this, I'm not going to do it. I think the millennials were like the last of the Mohicans that put up with it. It's like, oh, I want this job, so I have to go, make the commute to go and work at it. And they're just like, quality of life is more important.
Yeah. Did you lose any friends or family over during COVID?
Close. Didn't quite lose people, which is nice. Luckily, I didn't have friends that were of that extreme here. But when I say close, it was because I had asked my uncle, who's a pastor, to write me a note, like a religious note saying, oh, based on my beliefs, I'm not going to get the shot. And he refused to. I was like, what? He was like, no, our church believes in the shot and all this stuff. And I was like, okay. I mean, he didn't disown me, but I just thought it could have, like if either of us really stood our ground, then it could have. But luckily it didn't. I would say I got a lot of flack from older friends. Why don't you just get it? Why are you not vaccinated? Blah, 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 blah. So having to deal with judgment in that manner kind of prepared me in a lot of ways to be open on Akasha Hawai'i, because the things and the topics I talk about when I clip these readings are so out there. They're so out there that it's like COVID was such a great prep for that, for not caring about what people think. You're in the hot seat regardless. So yeah, so it was good. And in hindsight, I think it did help a lot of people to kind of pull the wool over their eyes, which is the same boat that I was in. Follow the rules, listen to the directives, do what you're told, be a good girl, quote unquote.
Well, yeah, in the Bible, Jesus was vaccinated. I'm just playing.
And I was like,
I'm just messing around. Going back to like Hawaiian like spirituality, is that strong still, or is it have you guys lost touch with your true essence, like your culture and your history. Because I was talking to some family members and one of my best friends, Fua, and Samoa. Like a lot of the new generation, they don't know nothing about the past, or even in Mexico, like we're forgetting the past of our ancestors. Is that happening in Hawaii as well?
I would say pretty much yes, but that's the same trajectory of anything, like the one thing that is great about Samoa and Mexico is that you still speak your language. So that's one key thing with Hawaii is that uh, the life of the culture is in the language. And
Mm.
back in about the late 1800s was when it was banned. So, because our Hawaii, for people that don't know, is illegally occupied. And, and then they say, oh, in I think it was 59 or whatever it was. Oh, everybody voted for statehood. It's like, well, if you have, as we know now, controlling the news and what's out there, if you control the opinion, of course, people are going to vote in the manner with which you want them to. But back to like the late 1800s when the language was banned, you couldn't speak Hawaiian in school without getting reprimanded. So that was such a quick way to take the culture away, was to ban the language. And then also the culture. So, you can't dance hula, you can't do. So in the 1970s, there was a resurgence. They call it the Hawaiian Renaissance, where there was a resurgence of the culture of hula, of song. And there was always songs, like Hapa Haole songs and stuff, like Johnny K. Almeida and people like that from like the 20s and 30s, with promoting, I don't want to say they promoted it, but they were just Hawaiians that sang and danced, But in the 70s, that was a resurgence of a lot of, which would be more of like dad/grandpa generation for me, saying, I want to learn how to sail, do traditional sailing. So Polynesian Voyaging Society was created, bringing back hula. So then you have Mary Monarch being created and stuff like that. So all of these things, that's why it was the Hawaiian Renaissance. But emphasizing the fact that you folks still have your language. I mean, that's huge because there is, with a lot of the Polynesian cultures, and Asian too. I don't know that much about Spanish, but I'm sure it's the same. That if you say a word, oftentimes there's not a good English translation for it, or a word might have a double meaning connotation. So that's why there's life in the language. So that's one. So the fact that majority of us don't speak it growing up, yeah, I mean, it's kind of always been on the decline. There is a resurgence of Hawaiian immersion schools, so that, my nieces and nephews all go to one. My youngest son, I'm putting him into one so that they learn the language immediately when they start going to school. But the culture in itself, I would say the stories of our people and things like that, the public schools, Department of Education, they could do a better job. Of course, everybody can do a better job, but they do have curriculum in the public schools for some type of Hawaiian culture. So all students, regardless, I think I even heard at one point they might mandate Hawaiian language in public schools, but I have never tracked that. There is, because you're in Hawaii, right? I mean, I used to say, before I would be public, I used to be like, oh, they're prostituting our culture and stuff like that, selling it, and the tourism industry. So pretty much I would say Hawaii will never, in a sense, lose its culture because that's the number one selling point. I mean, money is it. Money is the ticket, right? So, but your average child that grows up in Hawaii, on average, they don't speak the language, even if they are Hawaiian. There's more of an awareness of it, though. the stories of our people and things like that, those would, like the mythology stories and everything, that would be something that you would have to either look for or go to a different school to learn. So the school that I went to, I loved learning about Hawaiian mythology stories. And I love learning about different areas in Hawaii and what happened in those areas, why they're named what they're named. So it just depends on the person, to be honest. But I would say the general trending is similar to every indigenous culture around the world.
Yeah, thank you. I heard you talk about alternative healing. So you obviously had to experience some kind of trauma or some kind of suffering to even open the door to alternative healing. Maybe you can touch on that if you don't mind.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So trauma is something from doing hundreds of sessions of Akashic Records. I've learned every single person has trauma. Every single person went through something, and it doesn't matter what it is. It's not a matter of comparing traumas, but we've all gone through something. It just depends on, do you want to stay in that victim mentality or do you want to rise from it? So for me, I didn't quite get into alternative healing until last year, to be honest. So there are many things that have happened to me prior to last year. But the turning point was January of 2023. I was in a car accident. It was a very bad car accident. And in trying to recover from it in every way, emotional, physical, mental, all of that, I did, what your average person would do. And I contacted my, I guess, medical institution, I'll call it, medical system. And I asked to get a therapist. At the time, I didn't know that they were on strike. Their behavioral health therapists were on strike. So they kind of dismissed me. And at the time, I told them that the accident was so, it was the worst thing I've ever gone through in my life, hands down. So I was actually suicidal post-accident. So it was really urgent. I was like, can you get me an appointment with anybody? Even out of network, just anybody. I need to talk to someone. Oh, we'll get you an appointment in 28 days. And I was like, I don't know if I even have 28 days, So not so coincident. There are no coincidences from what I've learned. I think it was probably 2 days later, I came across a group Reiki session, and it was a free group Reiki session. And I was like, well, anything will help at this point. So I signed up for the free group Reiki session, probably 20, 30 minutes long. But after that session was done, it was pretty much, I would say, it didn't feel like it was life-changing at the time, but in hindsight it was, because it shifted a lot for me emotionally, where I was like, what is this woo-woo? What is this magic? What did you just do? So I followed that. Then I booked one-on-one sessions with that healer, who later, I think it was about 2 or 3 months later, she ended up teaching Reiki if you wanted to get Reiki 1 and 2. So I signed up for that because I was like, man, this is huge. Where my medical institution called me, I think a month later or so. Hey, we noticed that you canceled your appointment with your therapist. How's it going? I laid it in on them. I told them, I was like, this was the situation. You didn't take me seriously. I think I called a couple days later just to get another appointment. You still didn't take me seriously. And I was angry, not just for myself, but for the people that have the courage to even call and to say, I'm hurting, I'm thinking of committing suicide or whatever it is. I mean, that takes an immense amount of courage to do. That to even pick up the phone and say those words takes a lot. So I was so angry for those people that fell between the cracks that I told them, I was like, how many other people did you call to do a follow-up with who didn't answer their phone? That's why I was angry, because I was like, I'm not the only one. Everybody is, post COVID, there was a rise in suicide rates. So I was angry for other people that didn't have the means or the wherewithal to seek alternative, any type of therapy, exercising, going into the water, talking to a friend. That's all forms of therapy. I just so happened to find Reiki, and that was huge for me. So once I got my certification for Reiki, I ended up offering free crisis Reiki. So I did that for a couple of months, and that was like my introduction to energy right there, especially because it was free. Once you say something's free, you get everybody from the woodworks coming out, But my emphasis was on crisis. I don't want to, and that's why I say, I'm like, you can't really say somebody's in crisis and somebody's not, because it's based on their perception, right? So if somebody had a fight with their spouse, over dinner, I can't tell unless it's that for that person, it might be a really big deal. For somebody else, they're like, really? So because I had so many people signing up, I ended up having to like stop it because it just became overwhelming for me because it was free. But if people are in a crisis situation like I was, that is where my heart is to help them. So I learned a lot about energy. I saw not in everybody, but that's when I learned about entities. I learned about attachments and stuff like that. Was really seeing it like hands on. That was like in the fire training. And a couple of times, depending on, people have their own beliefs about different beings and whatnot. I've pretty much seen the gamut of all of them. I don't want to say all of them, because there's actually an infinite number of beings out there. But your angels, your people think are demons, stuff like that.
Yeah, thank you. I just had an episode on Maya, and she talks about being able to see these entities attached to a lot of addicts, people in general, but like addicts. When the more addictive, more someone suffering from addiction, they have all kinds of stuff attached to them. Pretty interesting.
Yeah, I know that's predominant across the board from what I've heard from other people. When I used to do the crisis Reiki sessions, I wouldn't ask for the reason. I don't need to know. I just know that you need help. So I don't know if I ever had addicts. When people do sign up for the energy healing sessions that I do, I don't even know if they have addictions. I would say 2 of them, I would talk to them. So that's one thing about doing Akashic Records readings as well as energy healing, is that because I saw a lot. Now, prior to my accident in January, I had learned in April of 2022 how to read the records. So I was already practicing on myself. I was already in the records, but I wasn't doing it for other people. That was the difference. So for that amount of time from April to January, they, guides and whatnot, they had me work a lot on fear, because I started perceiving galactic beings right away. And I thought they were demonic, because I never grew up with, I wasn't into Star Wars, to be honest. I've never even watched a full like season or series of Star Wars. It's just not of interest to me. I think the only one was Guardians of the Galaxy, because my ex was like, we're going to watch this. And I was like, oh God, here we go. Aliens, aliens. So, so I was never into that stuff. If you come to Hawaii, I would say the majority of the population is not into this stuff. Now, if you talk about ghosts, spirits, everybody knows that's commonplace. But aliens, what? So I'm kind of going off on a tangent, but a lot of our mythological stories across cross culture, if you look at the beings that are depicted and described, they are galactic. They're not of this earth. So, so they had me work a lot on fear, because I thought a lot of these galactic beings were demonic. So I worked on fear so much that by the time I said, okay, this was probably it was exactly a year later. April 2022 was when I learned to read the records for myself. April 2023 was when I started Akasha Hawai'i. So within that time frame, and of course from my own personal traumatic experience, it was like a crash course in getting comfortable with the unknown. That I was kind of just an open book from the car accident. Not that I welcomed things, but that I pretty much went through every kind of death except for physical post-accident, where it's like, I don't know who I am. I don't know about my career, all these things that I built for my life. What is this? You know, it was very much a coming to Jesus type of moment. So that when you kind of start off from ground zero again, it's like you're kind of just open to whatever. It's like, well, I don't know. What is reality? What is this? You know? So that openness, I think, is what allowed me to, and without fear, that's the number one thing I tell people too, is when you don't have fear, you don't see it through the lens of distortion. Because a lot of times when we're fearful of something, we distort what it is, or we distort the energy behind it because we're scared of it. But when you're not scared of something, then you can really see it for what it is and use your own discernment. So when it came to entities, when I would see entity attachments, and I call them entities, I don't call them demonic, because nothing truly, from the records, what I've learned, nothing is good or bad. There is no such thing as good or bad. You just have two polar opposites that help to catalyze something. So with the entity attachments, what I would do, because a lot of times they didn't want their host being worked on. What they are is they're just parasites. That's it. They didn't want their hosts getting better. So I would reason with them because I could see and talk to them. That's one thing about me, is that my clairsentience, which is feeling, is not as strong because I don't necessarily want to feel when I do sessions. I'd rather see and speak to it. So then I would talk to them and kind of reason, you know. For my corporate job, I do a lot of negotiations. So it's kind of second nature to me. I say, oh, you know, like, what do you want? Why are you here? Where did you come from? You know, talk to them about that. Okay, well, you know, don't you want a healthy host? Don't you want a host that's, you know, going to, because they're like a battery supply for them. Reason with them, they'll step to the side or they'll move when I'm working on them. And if it's that bad, I don't do removals, but I always refer them out. I'm like, hey, my Reiki teacher, she does these things. I'm going to give you her name and phone number. In as much as I try not to freak them out, just to make them be aware that, hey, you might want to do this. Because majority of the population is still very fearful when it comes to, oh my God, I have an entity attachment. Oh, I have a demon, you know? But you're absolutely right. When it comes to addiction, with substances, I would say it doesn't even have to be a full-blown addiction. But whenever we take certain things, even alcohol, technically alcohol is used ceremoniously in different cultures, but it's not used in excess, right? Because it does open your field up, as with other substances. So when you're open, but you don't have the discernment, anything can come through. Like holes in your aura. That's a pretty common thing that people have heard of with alcohol. But we're not trained, unfortunately. In the years to come, I know we will be. But for a lot of us, it was that knowledge was suppressed, right? This is commonplace for people that are of native cultures. That was commonplace, is energy. Everything is energy. So if we knew this knowledge that our ancestors had, yeah, maybe we might be more discerning. But if you look at the introduction of substances, especially alcohol, to all indigenous cultures, I mean, you can't help but think there was some kind of agenda there. You know, who are these native people that can connect to the other side? Oh, we better cut them off from their connection, you know? So I think there's a resurgence of that, because a lot of the world is mixed, you know? It's odd for me to go to places that don't have a wide variety of people. I know Asia and then different places like that, but I've been to the States, like the Midwest and stuff. That was actually a culture shock to me. was to go to the Midwest, because I'm so used to being in environments where it's highly mixed of different peoples and ethnicities, that to go to a place where you have to be siloed in a bucket, you're white, you're black, you're Asian, you're Latino, I was like,
Other.
Other? Can we mix all the buckets and I can like fit right in,
Yeah. Yeah, I found something to get rid of these entities. It's that fart spray, and you spray it all over you. No, I'm just messing up. Sorry, I'm being goofy. No,
And add like some sage and maybe some Palo Santo into the fart spray.
You may smell, but it'll get rid of them.
Yeah, exactly.
No, what's like their purpose, for being attached to us?
Yeah, excellent question. Excellent. That's actually what everybody should ask, to be honest, because every single person, what I've learned is that we're all psychic. Every single person is psychic. It's a matter of eliminating distractions so that you can tune into yourself and what's around you. That is why there's so many distractions. You have your phone, you have your TV, it's always going outside of yourself than inside. All the answers are in you for every single person. But guess what? We're distracted. I mean, I'm always on my phone too. Like so I'm not immune to it. But that should be the number one question. If anybody feels like their energy is off, ask, why is this off? Now, when people, that's why meditation, everybody says, oh, you should meditate, you should meditate, you should meditate. AKA, you don't actually need to become a Buddhist monk and just sit there in silence for days on end. All it is give yourself 5 minutes to sit on your couch, turn off the TV, put your phone on silent, and just sit there in silence and just see what comes through, right? So we a lot of times don't do that because we're constantly distracted. But what these entities want, and I'm so glad you asked this, these entities are actually creations of our own. That's what I've learned through talking to them. Because I would ask, where are you from? We're taught a lot that there's a lot, the boogeyman is outside of us. The boogeyman wants to get you, right? You allow these energies to come in. Okay. But then they wouldn't come in, right? Say somebody who's drinking, right? I'm more of like, hey, whatever you want to do what you want to do. Just be mindful of what you're doing, right? Say if somebody who's very spiritual has a drink, doesn't mean it's bad, but they might be aware of their energy field. So then it doesn't necessarily attach. But if you have somebody who's down in the dumps and their energy field is open for whatever reason, maybe they're not even taking a substance, but they're just open, then you can have attachments. Now, how does it stick? Or where do they get created from? So sometimes they could stick, but majority of the time what it is they need something to stick to, right? So say somebody, I'll give you real examples of it. So in one entity attachment I saw in a person, I asked it, where did you come from? It came from their root chakra, their fear of financial instability, just a little bit. And, that's a big theme for everybody. But what happens is you allow it to grow and to fester, and then it can become a full-blown entity. If you feed it, right? If you think of energy as food, sustenance, the more you feed it energy, oh no, I'm worried about this, I'm worried about that, how am I going to get this? You've heard of your thoughts create your reality. That's exactly it. So the more you feed it, think of the entity as like, oh, I'm feeding it this energy of fear, of whatever. Then it grows, it grows, it grows, it grows. There's only been one person I've come across who had full-blown, like what we would consider demonic entity attachments. And there were multiples of them. And it all came from the person, from whatever it was in their own field that caused these things to grow. So just as much as we take a shower every day for physical hygiene, we have to be mindful of our energy hygiene too, of releasing. And all it is just releasing. Just release whatever is bothering you, arguments, whatever it is. give yourself time to release. Just be like, okay, I'm going to put down the heavy bags today. There's so many things I could talk about with energy, but what would help people the most is to think about, I would explain this to clients, is to, every time they ask, everybody always wants to know, how do I make more money? How do I get this? How do I get that? They always show me your body as a plumbing pipe, which is our chakras, right? If you think of your chakras as the plumbing pipe, think of the tap, the faucet on top of you. The faucet is abundance. The faucet is money. The faucet is whatever you need when you need it. It is always on. It is never turned off. Your energy is like a plumbing pipe. So if you have a clog, say in your root chakra, because you're afraid of something, you're afraid of financial instability, well, guess what? That cannot flow, because energy, just like water, has to go both ways. Well, technically water goes down, but if you think of energy, it flows both ways, right? So it has to constantly be in flow. If you have a clog anywhere, say somebody's really angry or whatever, creates a clog, or even partially minor, whatever. So there's a lot of ways that energy moves. It could move so quickly where people can't hold on to money, for instance, and then it just goes, shoo, it goes right out. So then it's identifying, okay, what bucket? Think exactly like plumbing pipe. Then it goes and it drains out. For people that can't hold on to money, or it drains out too quickly, think about where you're draining it to. That's what they showed me, is to create different buckets. But predominantly, people, when they have blocks, that prevents it from being in flow. So when it comes to entities, I would say I don't see that for majority of people. So that's kind of safe to say, that majority of people don't have entity attachments, or they do something where they can clear it themselves. They go do something that makes them happy. They go to the beach, they do whatever it is. That elevation of your frequency helps to eliminate a lot of these things. So that's why it's important to do more of what you love and less of what you don't, so that you can clear it yourself. It's very simple, to be honest. I was thinking about this last night. I was like, all of this is really simple. We just make it more complicated.
I'm like, shit, do you see any on me right now? I was messing around. Man, so it's kind of like an egregore, like a thought form or something that
Bingo.
Wow. And
yeah,
we're fed a lot of fear. I talked about the news earlier. So when we're stuck in a lot of fear, a lot of stress in the system that we live in, how am I going to pay this? How am I going to pay that? Oh, so just broke up with me, et cetera, all that stress. And if we don't have spirituality or some kind of way to get centered and flush all that crap out, or talk about it, and help,
exactly. And that, that's huge, right? So even people that aren't necessarily spiritual, but they have an outlet, that release, if you think of it like the plumbing pipe, they can just release it, release. So somebody who maybe, say, loves running, maybe they're not the most spiritual person ever. They're releasing. They're taking that energetic shower. They're releasing. So spirituality is huge. For me, obviously, that's what helped me through my car accident last year. And I started going back to talk therapy this year, just to deal with different things that came up. And I didn't realize the magnitude that just talking to somebody had for me, So it's powerful. Any which way you can release, even talking is releasing. But it's really important to keep your plumbing pipe unclogged, which is to release in any manner you can. We're fed not just through MSM in the news, fear, but we're also fed fear even in the spiritual community too.
Yeah, you're right. Even in 12-step recovery,
yeah,
a lot of fear.
It's a lot of fear. It's a lot of fear that's circulating everywhere. So that's the best thing, is to how do you use discernment? How do I become discerning? You have to sit by yourself and eliminate distractions. Just do it for 5 minutes. Then you do it a little bit every day, a little bit every day, a little bit every day. And then you increase the amount of time that you're sitting by yourself, eliminating distractions. Then you can become discerning. It's simple. It's not hard by any means, But a lot of, even me before this journey, I was like, how do I become discerning? Like, I feel like my picker's not good, It was because I never sat by myself. I never just gave myself that time to be with me without having been so distracted.
And the system we live in, it's kind of doesn't want to give people time. It seems like to think, time to like just, work on themselves. Everyone's always on not everyone, but most people are in survival mode mentality.
Yep.
So it's crazy.
Yeah. It's all designed, to be this way, which is why technically a lot of us decided to incarnate right now. Majority of us, if you're interested in anything remotely spiritual or remotely like woo-woo, chances are you decided to incarnate right now for this ascension period. And that's the biggest reason why a lot of us are here. Technically, majority of the population are what people call starseeds. Your soul did not originate on Earth. Your soul is from different realms, different places. Then we came here for this particular time period. So.
Yeah, thank you. Going back to the Akashic Records, for those who may not even heard of the Akashic Records, what are the Akashic Records, if you don't mind me asking?
Oh, sure. So the Akashic Records are pretty much the field. I call it a field. It's not so much a book. If you think of everything you've ever thought, said, did across lifetimes, your current life, it's always getting uploaded to the field. If you think of the way the Microsoft Office suites work right now, it auto saves everything, right? So if you're typing something on your Word document, it auto saves it. That's exactly how the Akashic Records work too. It auto saves everything in real time to the field. So there's different records. There's different Akashic records. The Akash is it's a Sanskrit word, but it's everything. It's the ether. It's everything that's around us. Technically, we are just consciousness that's having an experience. And to get even more deep, what is God? What is source? We are just in the consciousness, the dream, if you will, of what source is. Source is a state of consciousness that wanted to experience more of itself. If you can imagine going through your entire life not having a reflection, right? You had no reflective surface. You didn't have a mirror. You didn't have a water that you could see what you look like. But you walk around just being like, this is me. I don't know what I look like, All of a sudden you catch a glimpse of yourself. Oh, that's what I look like? I want to see more. So that's why refractal, because every single person is a fractal of source. Every single person is God, right? And it took me a while to understand that because I also was raised religious. I was like, that's blasphemous. You can't say that you're God. But technically we all are, because when we fractal from God, it is because we were trying to get a different perspective of what God is, right? If God's like, I want to see what the back of my head looks like. I want to see what the back of my legs look like. I want to see what my hands look like. Then we fractal so that we can experience and to see more of what God is. So that is why every single person that you meet is a fractal of God. Now, there are some people that don't have souls, and that's a different story. But everything around us is divine. Everything is divine because everything is God. If one person was to ask, what is God? Look at yourself. Look around you. Everything that you see and you're experiencing is God. So that is actually what the records are. The records is the containment field of energy of information of everything that is God. So There are different records, right? So you can open the records of your house. You can open the records of this universe. You can open the records of a past life, of a particular person. It just depends on what you want to open the records for. I never knew that there were distinguishing records for each realm. I just opened the records and was like, hey, whatever comes through. I like to say the car accident cracked my egg. It literally cracked my egg because then I started communicating with the other side, with deceased people, everything. I was just like, I don't know who I am. So then the perception of whatever, when you're that open, you can perceive whatever is there without the lens of fear, because that distorts.
Interesting. You talked about the galactic Akashic Records and the universal Akashic Records. I heard you
Mhm.
mention.
Yeah.
What's the difference?
Yeah. So for whatever reason, I don't want to comment on other people's capabilities. But in my opinion, and I tell everybody this, I'm like, I'm not the only one that can open your records. I'm not the only one that can open the records of primordial records and beyond and go all the way back to source and see how and why you're fractaled. Every single person has that capability of doing it themselves. I just so happen, like I said, because I cracked my egg, I'm like, well, I don't know, show me whatever you want. So then I go further. I go way out. I always say I'm totally out of the stratosphere. You can't even see Earth. That's how far I go when I do sessions. And I work backwards and I bring you back to your current life. So there are technically, for whatever reason, I think to me, it depends on the person. I used to think it depended on their origination point. So wherever it was that they first landed, right? So when they fractaled from source and they decided, hey, I want to have an incarnation here, I want to go there. I used to think, maybe that's what relegates a certain person or individual to access the galactic records, say, or to access only Earth records because they were only fractal to be an Earth soul. Still possible, but to me, because you're a fractal of source, you can go all the way back to God. It just depends on what a person wants because the records are so vast that a lot of times I tell people, I'm like, hey, when you're first practicing, just keep a notebook, have questions ready. You might run out of questions. Okay. And then do it tomorrow when you do the next session. If you think about Google and all the questions that you can ask Google, that's pretty much, the records are beyond Google. I mean, Google is infantile compared to the records. But I like to use that as an analogy, as a tangible analogy. If you're going to open your records and ask a question, be specific. Otherwise, you might not get the answer because it's too broad. Majority of times, the records are not blocked. It just depends if you're asking, hey, I want this information so I can get revenge on my ex. Their guys might block you, So it just depends on your intention. If it's to help, generally, it'll never be blocked.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, you got my brain going all over the place. Like, which question should I be asking? Because you said a lot of great stuff, so I appreciate it. You talked about other lives. I actually believe in reincarnation. Do you believe we can bring in past life trauma? I like to ask that question at times.
Yeah. We can, but to be honest, every single person is so divinely created that you divinely create this life too. So it's not a matter of, oh my gosh, where did this come from? Like this nefarious evil being did this to me. It's like, no, you actually pre-planned it. So I like to tell people, I'm like, we have event markers in our lives that we hit. How we get there, there's many different roads to get to a certain event marker. You could take any of those roads, but it's all going to lead you, all roads lead to Rome. It's all going to lead you to that event marker. Marriage, kids, whatever it is that you pre-plan that are big event markers, it's going to lead you there. How you get there is a different story, which is why a lot of psychics might not give you the same information because they're reading all the different roads, but they all might tell you about that one event marker. So when it comes to trauma, past life trauma, technically, yes, but it is not nefarious. You can choose what trauma you want to bring into the current life. For instance, somebody may have died from water in a past life, but then decided, you know what, that I just wanted the experience of death by water, but I'm going to leave that there. That was all I wanted. So they might come into the next life Olympic swimmer because they decide I don't want to carry that into this life. Like I learned what I wanted to learn and I'm going to keep it there. Another person might say death from water. I want to carry that witch wound, for instance. So I'm using all real life examples. I might want to carry this witch wound that another client had and bring it here. Like a fascinating reading I did early on. so many things like blow my mind when people confirm it. I'm just like, oh my God, I didn't know that, So what she did was she was drowned by water, as a witch, so this was like Salem witch trial era. She was drowned by water. The manner of death, to be honest, we are very masochist. we do choose how we die, by the way. It's not like, oh, a random thing happened. We do choose how we die. We choose how we exit. I like to say how we exit, how we physically exit. Because remember, you're an infinite soul. You are always infinite. You can have whatever lives you want. You can incarnate, or you can choose not to incarnate at all. But the trauma, for instance, with that client, she had a witch wound around Salem witch trials. Current life, I told her, I was explaining to her the manner of death that I saw. It was like they bound her, so what you would think of bindings, but they anchored her. I couldn't tell what it was anchored down. She was anchored down, but God, this is like, when I see how people chose to kill people, I'm just like, it's both ingenious, because I'm like, wow, and it's also so cruel too, to see how people, just any manner of death, you want to murder someone. So what they did was they bound her feet so she was floating, right? Because she's anchored down. She's moving with. What happened was they knew the tides, so they put her down so that her head was above water, knowing when the tide rises, she's going to drown. So it was a slow drowning death. So she could see it. I could see it from her eyes. I could also see it from the people on the beach's eyes. I could see her watching everybody on the beach, but she's bound, so she can't move, right? But she kept going like this, like bobbing with the water, going in, out, in, out. So sure enough, that's how she drowned. The water kept going like this. Now, fast forward to current life. The client told me, she was like, I have always been scared of something underneath my feet. So that's why she was never comfortable swimming in deep water, whether it be a pool, whether it be the ocean. She was like, I'm not worried about sharks, but I'm worried about something at my feet, like grabbing at my ankles. So when I told her that was the manner of death that she chose to carry over into this life, it was like an aha moment, And a lot of times we choose a trauma so that we can heal from it. We can learn from it. It's not always about healing, but it's always about learning something. And it does help us in whatever way. It's all you, right? So that's why I'm like, figure it out. You can, you don't, you don't need to go see a psychic or a healer to figure out. You can connect the dots yourself. So once I told her that, she was like, oh, that makes sense. I was like, oh, it looks like you're going into the ocean, but you're kind of taking baby steps, So that was fascinating, because I didn't know in her current life she had a fear of being held down, like in that life. So to answer your question, yes, but it's not all the time. It just depends on what you want to pick and choose for this current life.
Wow, thank you. I really appreciate it.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you about Aloha, the power of Aloha, the principle behind it, because a lot of times it just becomes trendy. Go to Hawaii, but is there a principle behind it?
Yeah. So I'll explain Aloha from my point of view. I'm not going to quote like, oh, Alo means this and Ha means that. You can find that out.
Yeah.
My opinion of Aloha is actually what we all have as fractals of source. Aloha is just love. It's just unconditional love. You as a fractal of source are so divine. You're divinely made. You're divinely created. You are unconditional love. So I didn't know this, but before my car accident, another trauma I had, which I chose, right? Everything is self-induced. We all choose these things. Was my second son's father left when I was pregnant, and it threw me in a tizzy. He is the reason to heal from it. He is the reason why I learned the Akashic Records, because I was like, I need to find out our connection. How could I? And I knew that we were connected when we first met. I used to always tell him, you're like an enigma. I feel like because it's like I knew him, but I didn't know how. So fast forward, when I was in the records learning, I closed the session. I was just walking around. They showed me a vision of us on the other side making this contract. And that was the only time I ever was in source. And I knew I was in source because I felt such, now I do feel it when I'm in the records, but it's not the same potency as that vision. It was unconditional love. That's the only way I can put it. And the closest thing to it here is a parent's love for their child. But that doesn't even compare. It's just the closest thing to it. So when you're in source, which we all are, we are all fractals of unconditional love. That is who you are as a soul, is your unconditional love. It's hard because in this realm that we live in, it's so difficult to feel that, to really, truly feel unconditional love. Like I said, a parent's love for their child, you think of a parent that says, I would die for my child. Okay. Multiply that times 100. A parent might judge a child for something. Why are you doing that? Unconditional love would say, I love you for every choice that you make, because it is your choice to decide what it is that you're doing. I don't know why you chose it, but you're choosing it for your soul's growth, for whatever manner. That is unconditional love. So technically, this whole ascension shifting is getting closer to that point that we all forgot. That is who we are on the other side as spirit. But we incarnate here to experience that. I'm going to quote this other guy. You should put him on your podcast because he is awesome. Darius J. Wright. He does a lot of out-of-body experiences.
Yeah.
He is awesome.
Yeah, he's awesome.
Yeah. So he always says, we come here to experience that which we are not. That perfectly summarizes why we fractal here. A lot of us are like, this place sucks. Why am I here? You're here because you're here to experience that which you're not. I even like to tell people, I'm like, Trigger Hitler, that's a trigger name.
Yeah.
He is actually unconditional love too, as a fractal of source. He's just playing a role. We all play roles. So the victims on the other side are all part of the same agreement before you incarnate. We come in and we say, I'm going to do this. You're going to do that, to enact an experience. That's all it is. That's why nothing is inherently good or bad. What actually, if you want to say what's bad, it's stagnancy. The moment a realm, your life becomes stagnant, it dies. There's no reason for it. So there's many realms outside of Earth that go stagnant, right? So Aloha in a nutshell, to kind of rein it back in, is you at your core essence, which is unconditional love. Now, the people that can carry that, no matter what culture you are, have aloha, right? So what does it mean to have aloha? It's the golden rule. Treat others as you would have them do unto you. Aloha is, I look at somebody as though they're my family. Aloha is, it's everything. It's the essence of unconditional love, which is you at your core. But again, we have all these distractions, right? You like to get pissed off at people. But when you can break it down, that's all it is. Aloha is just unconditional love.
Well, that's beautiful. It's kind of like the Maya people. They would say in Lakesh, which meant like you are I and I am you. Like,
yeah.
I love you. We're one,
Yes.
And I appreciate that. The same thing like Namaste as well.
Yes.
Very similar principle.
Same. All same. Yep. Yeah.
Were they all connected at one time? Because we talked briefly about Lemuria or Mu. You often hear about Atlantis, but you don't hear a lot about Mu. Well, we're starting to now, but do you believe we were all connected at one time?
Yeah, absolutely. So I don't really bother too much with dates. I know there are other people that do a better job than I do when it comes to dates. The reason why I don't focus on dates is because time is very weird conceptually in the records from what we're used to. We're used to time being linear. So I'm going to reach over, as I do in all my sessions, and show you this ammonite. So this ammonite shell, I like to tell people, this is how time works. It is not linear. It's not point A, point B. Time is, this is you. These lines on the ammonite shell are all your lives. You have access to all these lives because you're right here. It's a spiral. Everything, that's why when you hear people say, oh, all time is happening at the same time. Yes, it is all happening at the same time. So when it comes to Mu, which is the ancient name for Lemuria, the records never called it Lemuria, by the way. That's, as many things are, it's man-made. They always refer to it as Mu. So for me, because obviously I'm in Hawaii, which is a remnant of Mu, I was always more attracted to learning about Mu Lemuria than I was about Atlantis. Atlantis is the other ocean away from me. So it was like my connection to Atlantis, So, and this is also part to kind of tie in what you asked about the loss of culture. Yes, this is a big, big reason why a lot of our cultures were suppressed, is because of this ancient knowledge that a lot of us carry. We all carry it in our blood, in our DNA. So it can never truly be suppressed, but it can be forgotten. You just have to relearn it. So at one time, basically Mu does predate Lemuria. So a little history lesson is Earth is a conscious sentient being. She was always here. Before we had civilizations occupying Earth, she was here. She's like a host planet. And there are, regardless of if people believe in aliens and galactic beings, that's another story. But concentrating on Earth, she was always here. Then there were different galactics that decided to seed Earth, to seed life here on Earth, because Earth is like a living library. So they seeded different plants, energies. So in the beginning time of Mu, it was plasma light beings that created Mu. There was life here before that, but if we just want to focus on civilization creation, so they seeded life here in Mu, which is the Pacific Ocean of where we are right now. So what Mu Lemuria was it was a huge continent. And there's a lot of earth shifts. So to bring in like geophysics, tectonic plates, we're in the Ring of Fire in the Pacific Ocean. It's constantly moving, right? Earthquakes, tsunamis, volcanoes. But at the time of Mu, it was just one continent. And then and this is all from what I've learned from the records. I'm not repeating what I've heard from other people. What the records have shown and told me is that the continent of Mu, that was first, right? If you want to say first. Then there was an earth shift. So there was a flood. The flood was of the magnitude of Noah's Ark, Noah's flood from the Bible. It was known that it was going to happen in Lemuria, in Mu. So certain people prepared for it. Other people, it was cataclysmic. So a lot of people either moved underground or they sought refuge in whatever which manner. But it was flooded. Then when the flood receded, what it did was whatever were kind of like the highest points of Mu at the time, then became big islands, huge islands, like bigger than what Hawaii is. That was like another time period of Mu, aka Lemuria. So in that time period, now we're getting into Atlantis, when Atlantis was created on the other side of the world. So the timelines kind of run like this, but it was always Mu Lemuria first, and then Atlantis was created later. So at the time of Atlantis, it was like big island nation. I don't want to say nations because it was all Lemuria. But the culture of what Lemuria and Mu is what you would see with Polynesian, anywhere that is influenced by the Pacific Ocean are Lemurians. So Polynesians are a given. You have Asians. So a lot of now fast forward, I'm kind of jumping around. Okay. So then Atlantis happened with the tsunami when they blew themselves up. That also impacted Lemuria, right? Because we're all on the same planet. Then it created what we see right now, right? So what a lot of people did to escape that was they went through inner earth tunnels to North, South America, also Asia. Before that Atlantean cataclysm happened, there were already groups of Lemurians that started populating what we now know as the Maya civilization. So I saw that tons of times, that the Maya civilization was actually populated. If you want to think of like an outpost of Lemuria, it was all there. So South America was populated by Lemurians. And then obviously they survived all the cataclysms. And then it's the culture that we know now as. So yes, so pretty much a lot of the cultures that you see now that we are familiar with, if they're around the Pacific Ocean, they are Lemurians. So, Aborigine people, Maori, Asians, like they're all Lemurians that scattered and started populating other places. The Maya civilization, I mean, if you want to go, where did the Mayans go? Where did the ancient Mayans go? So they all went underground. They went into inner earth. And interestingly enough, I didn't know this because again, like I didn't really have a huge connection to whatever. So that's a big thing when people decide to learn their records. Don't have expectations. Just allow it to show you whatever you're meant to see. So because I didn't have a connection to anything Mayan, I was like, I don't know, show me whatever you want. This isn't a session. I was shown that they went into inner earth to survive, tsunamis, all that stuff, all the cataclysms that naturally happen on Earth, by the way. So if you listen to geophysicists, they might say 6 to 12,000 years, others might say longer. But Earth always shifts. That's one thing that we forget. She always shifts. It's just, oh, too bad, so sad, you're an Earth dweller. So you're going to get impacted on the surface, right? But the Mayans actually went into inner Earth, and that's how they escaped. But they were later taken off planet. So then we're getting into galactic stuff. So inner Earth was meant to be kept pristine. And I know a lot of people have different information about inner Earth. I'm only sharing what I know from the records. So that's another thing about truth, right? Is I use the parable of the 6 blind men and the elephant to explain this. The parable of the 6 blind men and the elephant is that there's 6 blind men and they're all feeling an elephant. And from their unique vantage point, they are explaining what it is that they're feeling. So one person is feeling the trunk and they're saying, oh, this is a snake. Another person is feeling the butt. So they're saying, oh, this is like a hippopotamus or something. They're not wrong. They're just limited in their perspective. So that's why I like to say for every single person that's alive, your truth is not wrong. It's just whatever you see from your unique vantage point. That's it.
I love that. Thank you. You brought me thinking about India, because in India they use that analogy with God, right? With religion and God. It's all God. You're just trying to share your perception, your understanding, your limited understanding or experience. But they also talked about the Naga people as well, the Nagas, which basically means serpent. And they went underground, they say, similar to the Mayans. And the Mayans had the serpent symbology. You find that in the Asian cultures, all the dragon and the serpent, and even in Hawaii. I told you I've seen some dragon symbology. That's all Mu?
Yeah, that's all Mu. Yeah.
It's like a Raider sign or something?
Yeah.
Sports team? Flag?
That's all of our ancestral lineage sport team flag. So if you look at all the cultures, I mean, because they're all Lemurian, right? Technically, even on like the UK side in Europe, like there was dragons there. So dragons were actually, in my opinion, they were one of the first creatures to kind of inhabit. I never saw dragons in the beginning of Mu, but if you talk about I don't even say primordial creatures, but technically dragons, in a nutshell, dragons are not endemic to Earth. They actually come from a different universe altogether. And as many creatures, if you think about colonization and things that are brought to different places, then dragons were brought to this universe, and then they came of their own volition. There's many, many different reasons why there's dragons. Dragons are amazing, by the way, not to kind of silo the snake people with Hydra, Naga, all that stuff. But this is why everybody should have an open mind about mythology stories. They're not wrong. We just don't have a context for them because we don't see them in our reality, right? Doesn't mean that they're not there. We're just on a different radio station where we can't perceive them. So a lot of the stories of serpent people, beings, are what in Hawaiian culture we call mo'o. So if you Google mo'o, what is the definition of mo'o? It's an all-encompassing word. Like we were talking about the etymology of, language. It's an all-encompassing word for a dragon, serpent, all these things it's like mo'o. We just call them mo'o. In Maori culture, I think they call it moko. There's a lot of similarities in language, by the way, because this all goes back to Mu time, right? So in that era of Mu and Lemuria, there's a lot of different beings that populated this area of the world, like Indian civilization, like all of that. Like we've all been influenced by Lemuria. It just hasn't really been talked about, because if you look at the popularity, right, of what became popular first, it was Atlantis, because a lot of people are in the States, or they have the more of a closer geographical connection to Atlantis, versus people that are maybe Asian. You'd have to search for it. It's not as commonplace, but maybe in places like India, you might have a lot of texts about Lemuria. So it's a common, even ant people, like I've seen ant people in the records that are inner earth types of beings. They're all true. It's just like I say, I'm like, well, where'd they all go? We're just not on the same radio station. We will be. The Miami Mall incident was an excellent example of it. It was an excellent example of our radio stations. So there will be more. I know there's, Project Bluebeam and stuff like that, talking whatnot. That's why it's important to use discernment. My personal opinion when I tune into the Miami Mall incident was that it was just the radio stations were like blended. So, people can, it's going to be happening in the very near future. Our radio stations becoming blended again, right? More people are starting to perceive the other side. That's just our frequencies on both radio stations coming in tune to each other. The importance is not to be fearful, though, so that you can discern it correctly or for what it is, not correctly, but just for what it is.
Yeah, I appreciate it. I appreciate your time. I really appreciate it. Learning from you. You open up my brain, and I'm like, I have all this food for thought, so I can't wait to re-listen to this stuff. So I really appreciate it. Yeah. Thank you for coming on.
So, I will say though, this too, is that, I by no means consider myself a gatekeeper of the records. A lot of people are like, oh, come do a reading with me, or come to my class, and then you can learn to read the records too. Technically, we all access our records all the time, and we don't even realize it. You might have a memory, you might have a download, you might have a deja vu moment. That is you going into your records because it is the field, right? So you might even pick up something intuitive about a friend or about somebody you just met. You're like, I don't know how I know this about them. It's because you're in their field. So you're tapping into their records, and you might not even realize it. Because to encourage people, to empower them, to go into your records, I share a quick and dirty method freely, which is to open your heart space. That is, your heart is technically a portal. Your heart is an umbilical cord to source. So what does it mean to go into my heart? What does it mean to go into my heart space? To think of something you love. I'll give you a real example. Think of my son. Oh, that automatically puts me here because he's the cutest little thing ever. And then I think of him more. I might think of a memory, in my mind, boom, pops up this Christmas clip of him he was maybe like 12 months old. He was this chunky little thing, and he was like walking, So then when I think of it more, it opens up my heart space, right? So when your heart space is opened, now you start asking questions. Eliminate the distractions. Now you can start going into your records and be like, okay, I want to connect to my guides. I want to connect to my highest level guides. Can you help me with this thing? Then you start going into your records that way. You technically don't need to say a prayer, a mantra, anything. This is your connection. So this is also to touch on religion. This is also why the heart is demonized in a particular big religion. That was a huge learning lesson for me, because I grew up Christian, and I was told your heart lies, your heart deceives, don't listen to your heart. Fast forward, Akashic Records, this is the portal. This is your connection, is your heart. So to kind of leave people with that, you have the power to go into your records yourself. I encourage every single client that I do a session with, I actually record my process in case they want to use it. But I always remind them, I'm like, you can do it yourself. Everything I'm telling you, you can do it too.
Yeah, thank you. And briefly, what's the difference for you between spirituality and religion? Or is there a difference?
Religion is man-made. I always knew that before I was into this stuff. Think of the game that we used to play in school, telephone, right? Say purple banana, goes around the whole room. By the time it ends on the last person, blue dinosaur. What? So if you think of religion, it's like, how are these texts not manipulated for millennia, or even for a couple thousand years? How do you know that somebody didn't influence that? So that's number one. Religion is man-made. Spirituality is what you are. You are spirit. So it doesn't matter if somebody thinks they're spiritual or not. You are always spirit. You are a soul that decided to have an experience in a body. So you're a spirit. That is where we all come from. So that is your innate original essence, is spirit. So spirituality is what you are, regardless if you want to tap in to yourself. You can say you're spiritual, but you don't need any labels to know that you are spirit. So that's the biggest difference, is that we are always spiritual because we are spirit in essence. Religion is, it's a whole nother story.
Yeah, appreciate it. And how can we find you if people want to link up with you?
Yeah, sure. So I have a website, akashahawai'i.com. I use Calendly to book appointments. So I have a few offerings. I have on camera, which is a full session Akashic Records reading. I also have a remote mini session available for people that, might not want to do on camera, or our times don't always align. And then I also offer energy healing, which, like I was saying, is like multi-dimensional Reiki type of appointment. So same thing with the records. Both on-camera option as well as remote. So that's it in a nutshell. I kind of like to stick to, what I do best, which is the records and seeing and intuiting energy.
Yeah, thank you. You were awesome. And I'm going to end it with a quote by Helena Allen. She's an author, and I got this book in Hawaii when I was there. Okay. And she says, Aloha was a recognition of life in another. If there was life, there was mana, goodness, and wisdom. And if there was goodness and wisdom, there was God quality. One had to recognize the God of life in another before saying aloha. But this was easy. Life was everywhere, in the trees, the flowers, the ocean, the fish, the birds, the pili, the grass, the rainbow, the rock. In all the world was life, was God. Aloha. And you helped us expand so beautifully on that today. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you. That was a beautiful quote.
Thanks. Take care.
All right. You too.
Bye-bye.
Just know we out here. Know we out here working in a major way. Had to speak on it just to make a play. Any given subject, know we make a way. Time to level up on a day-to-day. Know we out here working for the greater good. Expand your mind, broaden your lens the way you should. From the stars to the galaxy to speak on spirituality. Higher understanding for the neighborhood.